The Holy Gospel this morning comes in St. Luke in the 5th chapter. Now once, while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw two boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them and were washing the nets. So he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put it out a little way from the shore. And then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. Now when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Oh, Master, we've worked all night long, but have caught nothing." "Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." So when they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they both began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you're going to be catching people." And when they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. The gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. Wonderful set of stories we have here, both the great call of Isaiah to be a prophet and the call of Peter to be a disciple, and there's such an interesting way of looking at this that starts back in the year that King Uzziah died. He reigned for 40 years, and so the Israelite people only really knew King Uzziah and his reign. So when he died, the whole country, the whole way of being had kind of shifted. And Isaiah has this vision of all that the world can be in this time of transition. Imagine if you have lived for 40 years under one particular understanding, one particular rule, one particular way of doing things, and all of a sudden now you have this whole future laying in front of you, a panoply of options, of ways to go and things to do and people to be. So much greatness can be part of your life. There's all of God's promises for peace and harmony, for love and justice and righteousness. And all of this lays before Isaiah, and as Isaiah looks at this future that is before him, he says, "Bah! One small little hink of an issue, just a tiny thing, God, is that we are not really worthy of anything better. In fact, we are a sinful generation, and we're pretty much should get any destruction that you could possibly lay upon us. We are clearly not worth this great and grandiose vision of the future that you have laid before us." And at that moment, then one of the seraphs grabs a coal with a tong and flies down to Isaiah and touches his lips, purifies Isaiah, and says, You will speak of this future to which we are being called." And so Isaiah then goes on to write another 60 books into his oeuvre of work. And he writes great lines like, we shall mount on wings as eagles. Phrases that bring about the restoration of God's promises for justice, righteousness, hope, and peace. So you have Isaiah kind of laying back there in the back of what's going on with Jesus and this story that he has at the side of Lake Gennesaret. And as Jesus is there teaching, he's there and he sees all these people, and all the while that he's teaching, there's these fishermen. Now he's borrowed one of their boats, and he's using the water as a megaphone, sort of an early microphone. The voice carries bouncing off the water better, so he can reach more people. So he's got this little thing going on here, this little sonic boom. But he borrowed this boat, and these fishermen are off to the sides tending their nets. They've been fishing all day and all night and have received nothing in any of the way of substantiating their life. And all the while, Jesus is talking about whatever he's talking about. And Peter hears it, of course, his brother Andrew and James and John. So they're all there, and at the end, when Jesus finally sends everyone away, when class is over, so to speak, he says to Peter, the owner of the boat, he says, "Hey, let's go fishing." And Peter's like, I don't know how to tell you this because you're not really a fisherman, but it's not a good time for fishing. We've been doing it all day and haven't had a lot of luck. And you can see where Peter's coming from. I mean, here's this rabbi who's just kind of co-opted his boat over the last few hours, and now he decides to go fishing. He's like, what does this rabbi know about fishing? I mean, as far as Peter knows, Jesus doesn't even have a real job. Like my dad said, once I became a pastor, he said, well, at least I know what you do one day a week. And, I mean, it's just sort of this, what do you have to tell me about fishing? But something about Jesus impels Peter. And Peter, therefore, says, all right, whatever, let's go fishing. And he goes fishing, and in the process of this, he catches more fish than he could ever have imagined, so much so that he says to James and John, hey, brothers, come on, get your boat out here too, because I'm starting to sink in mine. And they fill their boat up, and all of a sudden, Peter's looking around going, who is this guy? Who is this guy that can bring about such a thing that even this old fisherman couldn't have imagined? And so when they get back to shore, they put the boats up on the shore, they put the nets away, they take care of the fish, and then Jesus tells Peter, you don't have to fish for fish anymore. You can start fishing for people. And indeed, Peter does. And he never fishes for fish again. Puts his boat aside and begins to follow Jesus. So much so that over the course of time, Peter becomes a central figure in the story of Jesus, especially after Jesus has died and resurrected by God. And in the early church, we find that Peter is central to forming the Christian community as it's based in Jerusalem. So much so that by the time Peter dies, the story has it that Peter is crucified head down because he is not worthy to be crucified head up like his Lord and Savior, Jesus of Nazareth. So there is within this understanding of what God is doing here sort of a way in which the world begins to change. And it starts with a tired fisherman who goes from catching fish to fishing for people. And if we begin to look at how God acts, one of the things that's so interesting is that God is willing to take our skills, our talents, whatever we might have available to us. And when they are coupled with the desires that God has for the world or for us individually, our skills and talents, when they meet with God's desires, become the ministry that God uses to fulfill the promises of the world. So, for example, here at First Lutheran, we believe that all ministry is grounded in authenticity. Authenticity to who we are and what we are about. We're not interested in importing ministries from someplace else that don't have anything to say to us or don't mean anything, aren't grounded in the very soil, or in this particular case, the very snow of our particular community. But in spite of that authenticity, we understand that we come out of a tradition steeped in stories about Peter and Jesus, Martin Luther, the Danish church. And in those stories, we understand that our future is going to continually be built, grounded, rooted in that tradition from which we come, but always seeking to respond to newer ages, newer times, newer peoples who find themselves within the purview of what we're about. And then in doing so, of course, the ministry that we seek to do here at First Lutheran is founded in understanding that we are here to make a difference, to fish for people, to help people in their faith journeys and their ways of going forward in their lives with God and what God has invited them to do. So what we do is we understand that the desires that God has are coupled with the skills and talents, and we try to find our skills and our talents, our gifts, whatever they might be, and match them up with God's desires, so that the ministries that we provide here at First Lutheran, fully grounded in what God desires for the world, using what gifts, skills, talents we have, as meager as we might think them to be. But when God's desires meet with our talents and skills, just like Peter, we go out into a boat that we thought had long since been fished out, and the abundance is overflowing. Peter's skill as a fisherman was used because it was God's desire to catch fish. And Peter's skill as a fisherman was used because it was God's desire to fish for people. And Peter was able to accomplish that not because he was necessarily the best fisherman on the lake or necessarily even the most skilled evangelist, but he was willing to offer his skills, his talents, his gifts as a fisherman for God's desire to reach out with love and grace throughout the world. Now, somebody will say to me that, well, I don't always know what my gifts and my talents are, and that's okay. Because let me tell you about a favorite gift of mine that I see almost every Wednesday night. Now, if you haven't been here on a Wednesday night, you should come every now and then, but I do invite you to wear a crash helmet and at least a flak jacket. Because one of the things that happens is there's a lot of kids. And those of you who have been around kids periodically over time know that they are very fast. They like to run. They have a lot of energy. You may have heard of this about children, maybe your own children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever it might be. They just go very fast. And they run back and forth very fast on Wednesday night. There's lots of running. Although I got to be honest with you, I'm here in this building too, and I don't see any reason to be running, but kids are kids, and they're running all over the place. And what will happen, and I will say this happens at least once a Wednesday, certainly 3 out of 4, there will be a senior adult who is here with us this particular Wednesday. And they might be here because they're dropping off one of their kids for a Life Night program, or they might be here because they're for a special event at Worship Lab, or they might be here because they're enjoying our community meal together, whatever the reason is, and they're sitting in one of the chairs or they're sitting down on one of the benches, and these kids are running back and forth. And this senior adult will stop me and they'll say, Pastor, they say, it is so great to see these kids here in church. So great to see them running back and forth. And all these kids are doing is running. And of course, it's my job and the job of other concerned adults to always tell the kids, listen, slow down. But we can never forget that the very running that they do is a gift that they offer. Because how great is it that this senior adult can be sitting here on a Wednesday night and see the power and energy of God in a child running to and from across the narthex, and understand that this is something worth making a comment to me about. That they will actually say something like, this makes me happy. This is God's desire, being matched with a skill and a talent that a 5-year-old has, that those of us who have long since passed that stage of life no longer feel the need to run. I mean, I look at all those kids running and I'm like, oh, wait till you get to be my age, kid. You'll wish you'd saved up all that energy just to get out of bed, But it is precisely God's desire to see someone who is here who might be feeling a little tired, who might be feeling a little worn down because the years have added to their stress and their strain, and to be able to experience in the running back and forth of children on Wednesday night the energy and power of what God desires for all of us. These are the kinds of things we're talking about when we're talking about our gifts and our skills and our talents. It's nothing major. It's just simply running like a child. It's the things that we do. And maybe we've practiced them. Maybe we've put in a lot of effort and time to practice our art or to practice our skill, to find a way in which we can begin to offer something. But God will match that skill up with God's desire to make a difference in the world, and it doesn't matter how young or how old you are. It doesn't matter how skilled or talented you may be. God will find a way to do that. It happens all the time. As we create ministry that makes a difference in the lives of people, we do it because we follow God's desires with our talents. And just so you know, we usually, of course, try to think of it the other way. We want to use our desires, our passions, and hope that God can fill in the blanks and provide all the necessary skills and talents. A classic one is saying, God, I desire the 6 numbers of the lottery. You have the skill to know the future. Please give me those 6 numbers. That's our desire with God's skill. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about God's desire for hope and peace, that world that Isaiah envisioned, that world of love and grace and truth, that God desires, and you and I work out of our gifts and our skills and our talents, whatever they may be, to make our little mark in helping those desires of God become reality here at First Lutheran Church in Blair, Nebraska. So, when we look at something like what goes on with Jesus, Peter, and the fish, we don't have to necessarily wonder how such a miracle could happen, but rather to impress upon ourselves that the miracle is there, waiting for all of us to be able to enter into the boat one more time, to be able to use whatever God has gifted us with, so that when God's desire for the world can be shown, we can go out into the boat and just fish. Just do the things that we've done thousands of times before. This was probably not the first time Peter had ever caught a fish, but it was his last. And as he went forward, he knew that whatever was going to happen wasn't going to depend on how skillful he was, but rather on how much God desired a better world. And as Peter lived his life, so we live our lives. Not worried about whether we have the right skill set, not whether worried about we're talented enough or good-looking enough or our children are all above average, but rather whether we are following God's desires for hope, love, peace, a world of justice and hope. Because finally, that's what matters, that we do God's desires and God's will, always, no matter how tired we may be, no matter how much fish we haven't caught. Amen.